came about because BPW women look to the future while preserving the best of the past. Maintaining a solid tradition of raising money for scholarship awards to Maine women has been the priority of the Futurama Foundation. Indeed, our name comes from the BPW-sponsored Futurama Craft Fair, held annually for 25 years at the Augusta Armory, a labor-intensive event, to say the least, but gratifying. We were women helping women through both the scholarships awarded and the public exposure of women's crafts and small businesses. Our articles of incorporation for the Futurama Foundation include more than scholarships, however. Other goals are to establish a library and research center to preserve and share information concerning business and professional women's organizations, to conduct and/or support surveys and other research projects on current state and local problems of importance to the community and to women, to study business conditions with reference to working women in other countries, to encourage personal development and aspirations of individual women through programs and conferences. The Futurama Foundation is young and growing. Our scholarship program is thriving, and we're still looking for the places where we can make a difference. A few months ago, the trustees agreed that one area where we could be comfortable and effective in working would be as a co-sponsor of the Maine Women's Hall of Fame. And that's proving to be a good decision. The Hall has achieved a noteworthy first decade. The support and cooperation of the University of Maine, Augusta, has increased and increases yearly. The 14 honorees from past years are solid role models for Maine women. This year's 2 new honorees are incredible women whose well-documented efforts are making positive changes in women's lives. Women's history is preserved here. It is made available to the public. Women's achievements are recognized. The variety and scope of women's influence in the past will help to shape the decades ahead. The Maine Women's Hall of Fame is indeed a bridge. Come, stand on that bridge with us and look both ways to anticipate the future and appreciate the past. Thank you.
My name is Sally Cox, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Hall of Fame, and this is Maxine Russakoff, the other co-chair. And I want to thank Nancy Davis, Tom Abbott, and Jean Hammond for their introduction and greetings to us here tonight. And I do have a short letter from the Governor, Angus King. Thank you for inviting me to participate in the upcoming Maine Women's Hall of Fame. I will be unable to attend, but I would like to extend my greetings to the deserving candidates, Senator Olympia Snowe and Speaker Elizabeth Mitchell. Both women are outstanding citizens and role models that Maine can be very proud of. And the other letter that I would like to share with you is from the President of the Senate of Maine, Mark Lawrence, and he thanks us for the invitation to the Maine Women's Hall of Fame. Regrettably, he has other commitments and could not be here tonight, and he extends his best wishes to both of our inductees tonight and wants to wish us good luck with the program. To begin with, we would like to take a few minutes to honor the 14 people that have preceded us in the decade in the Hall of Fame, and Maxine and I will be sharing some information on each of them with you. Maxine?
I also have the guest book. If you haven't signed it, we're going to pass it around. One last time. In 1990, the late Senator Margaret Chase Smith was nominated by DPW Skowhegan in the Margaret Chase Smith Library. She was the first woman elected to serve in both the houses of Congress. Her name was placed in nomination for the President of the United States, the first time a woman was so nominated by a major political party. Angela Stockwell is here representing her today, and this is very important to me because I was president of DPW Skowhegan at the time the senator was inducted. I was very thrilled. Angela?
The second inductee in 1990 was Mabel Wadsworth. Mabel Wadsworth, would you stand, please, while we're... Please stand. Would you stand, please? Have everyone know who you are. And Mabel Wadsworth was nominated by the Family Planning Association of Maine and the Mabel Wadsworth Women's Health Center. She is certainly a very deserving one to be honored. And she organized in the 1960s the first family planning program in Maine and became its first director. And in the early 1970s was instrumental in establishing the Maine Family Planning Association and was its first president. She was the original founder of the Mabel Wadsworth Women's Health Center, and we're very pleased that you could join us today.
In 1991, the late Gail Laughlin, J.D., was nominated by DPW Fulton. She was the first woman from Maine to practice law, graduating from Cornell School of Law in 1898. It's hard to say 1898. She was involved with the suffrage movement. In St. Louis in 1919, she helped establish the National Federation of Business and Professional Women's Clubs and was elected the first president. She practiced law in California and returned to Maine in 1924 and opened a law firm with her brother. She served 3 terms in the Maine House from 1927 to 1934, and then 3 terms in the Maine Senate from 1937 to 1941, where she was the first woman with a law degree to become a member of the Maine legislature. And I believe that Joyce Fitzpatrick, who is from DPW Fulton, is representing her. Would you stand, Joyce?
Dr. Elizabeth Russell, who was nominated by AAUW of Maine. She is an outstanding scientist, one of the relatively few women elected to the National Academy of Science. She was the author of over 120 papers with specialty in patterns of aging and the genetics of blood abnormalities. Dr. Russell.
In 1992, the late Dean Nanetta M. Reynolds was nominated by DPW Waterville. She was viewed as one of the Maine's most respected leaders in the educational circles and served as Dean of Women at Colby College in Waterville for 27 years. She was a leader in fundraising for the Women's Union at Colby College, and in 1959, the Board of Trustees voted to name the Women's Student Union as Reynolds Union in her honor. And the DPW president of this year is Cheryl Llewellyn, who is here, and if you would just like to stand, Cheryl.
In 1993, the late Dorothy Healy was nominated by AAUW of Maine. She was curator and co-founder of the Maine Women's Writers Collection at Westbrook College. She is most noted and remembered for her tireless efforts to collect and preserve the novels, stories, diaries, journals, letters of noted Maine women writers, and most especially for her loving diligence in uncovering the writings of the many unsung Maine women who, in fact, were pioneers in many fields of literature.
In 1993, and I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce it right, Jilda, okay. I always do it wrong with Jilda. Jilda Nadone, if you'd like to stand, Jilda, was nominated by Val Sturman. And Val, if you'd like to stand too. Val Sturman is from Portland. She was the DPW Maine past state president. Gilda developed and managed the Maine Displaced Homemakers Program, now known as the Maine Centers for Women, Work, and Community. From the time service delivery began in 1978, in recognition of her significant contributions to women and the girls in Maine, she received the Maine Commission for Women's Progress Award in 1989 and the Mary Ann Hartland Award in 1991. We're very pleased that you could be with us tonight.
In 1994, Esther Elizabeth Ward was nominated by the BPW Skowhegan and Gorham Alumni Association class of 1948. She graduated from Colby College in 1926 and Radcliffe College in 1929. Her love of history took her to Gorham Normal School, later known as Gorham State Teachers College, where she taught history for 42 years, from 1930 to 1972, becoming a full professor of history. She notified us that she was sorry not to be able to join us today, but at 93 with poor eyesight, she doesn't get out as much now as she used to. She said being selected as a Maine woman to be honored in the Hall of Fame was a great surprise to me, and when I am depressed, I can think of a wonderful award and feel much better. And Virginia Foster, who is instrumental in nominating her for the Scouting BPW.
Eloise Vitelli was nominated by the Maine Centers for Women's Work and Community. And Eloise is with us. You'd like to sing it? Eloise is an Associate Director of the Maine Centers for Women's Work and Community. She is an innovator and an advocate for women's economic empowerment. She has been very active in the field of entrepreneurship training since 1983. When she coordinated the Maine Businesswomen's Survival Skills Project. She went on to develop the New Ventures training program for the Maine Centers and was the founder of the Women's Business Development Corporation. We're very glad that you came.
In 1996, Elizabeth Liz Crandall was nominated by AAUW of Maine. She is a home economist, feminist, and citizen activist. She is truly a leader in the movement to improve the physical, emotional, social, and political environment for women of Maine. She enjoyed attending the induction ceremony since her own and had planned to attend today, but her husband is in the hospital in very serious condition, and she has been very faithfully staying at his bedside and would like to express her gratitude for being inducted in the Hall of Fame a few years ago, and is sorry that she could not be with us today.
Sarah Walton, who is the head of, going to be the president of AAUW. No, I'm sorry, the League of Women Voters. Gotcha. I knew I always do. In 1996, the late Marty Stevens was nominated by BPW Skowhegan. She was a humanitarian, an educator, and director of theater. Her legacy to Maine is in education, inspiration, and theater, reflecting her belief that education and knowledge will provide power and a better world. Her love of life, talents, and energy and enthusiasm were boundless, and the people of Maine were the beneficiaries. Those of you that have been to Lakewood knows that she was very instrumental in keeping the theater going, and it goes on in these days. Her training for tomorrow was a successful program she developed with the Maine Centers for the Women's Work and Community and Aspire, and that has been replicated in the state of Maine and continues to be used statewide. The current president of BPW Skowhegan is Neola Davis. If you would like to stand, Neola.
In 1997, Mildred Brownie Trump was nominated by the Bangor Daily News, University of Maine General Alumni Association, and Priscilla Dodge. She is a home economist, columnist, humanist, author, and cook. She can truly be called the first cook of the state of Maine. Brownie spark, her stimuli for good, simple state of Maine cooking influenced over 3 generations of Maine families. She has been a part-time instructor at the University of Maine for several years, and then she was a columnist for the Bangor Daily News for 42 years. She is presently staying at a nursing home in the Orono area, and Priscilla Dodge, one of the ladies who nominated her, is here representing her today. Priscilla.
And in 1997, Ethel Dilly Gannon was nominated by DPW Lismore Falls. She is a mother, grandmother, teacher, humanitarian, and innovative founder of the Washburn New Orleans Living History Center. New Orleans is the historic home of the famous Washburn family, and she has made the New Orleans Living History Museum a valuable reality for the people of Maine. We're very pleased you could be with us today, Billy, and I would just like to recognize Hilda Cockham, wherever she's sitting. And presented to Billy. Thank you.
And last year, in 1998, Lois Galgay-Reckett was nominated by BPW BAD. She is a woman's advocate, human rights protector, skillful mediator, articulate educator, and dedicated feminist. She is executive director of the Family Crisis Service in Portland and has been at the forefront of Maine's effort to stop domestic abuse and assist its victims. She regrets that she isn't able to be with us here today to pay tribute to her sister Honoris. I really feel sorry for her. She's on her vacation in the South Pacific, a nice place to be. She offered her congratulations to this year's worthy inductees. She has admired Libby and Olympia for years. Libby's groundbreaking election as Maine's first woman Speaker of the House was a personal thrill to her, and Olympia's courageous work in Congress on women's issues is most worthy of acknowledgement. To both women, she recognizes them as true leaders, and she is pleased that both of you are being inducted today. And I would like to recognize Jean Levance of BAD BPW. And now we will move along to the presentation for Senator Olympia Snowe, Joy Snowe, President of the Caribou BPW, Jerry Mann, Vice President, and member Janet Roan will do the presentation for Senator Olympia Snowe.
It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be standing here tonight on behalf of the Caribou Business and Professional Women to present this distinguished award to one of our great state and national leaders, the Honorable Olympia J. Snowe. Today marks another milestone in women's history as we enter her name in the Maine Women's Hall of Fame here in Augusta. The struggle for equality of women has been ongoing since the beginning of time. Women have progressed immensely since then, but the road has been a narrow one to travel. It's because of women such as Senator Snowe that we, as women, are able to set any goal that we wish to achieve in life today. The perseverance of women's equality is an essential ingredient in human progress. Senator Snowe's perseverance stands as an essential quality of her character in high-level leadership. She has stood by women, with women, and behind women to ensure that our rights can only continuously improve and that our voice will not be isolated in today's society. It is soothing to know that today, when we ask our daughters what they would like to be when they grow up, they're able to answer a biochemical engineer, an astronaut, a pastor of a worldwide ministry, maybe even CEO of General Motors, a Supreme Court judge, a United States Senator, or even maybe President of the United States. It is comforting to know that we have such women as Senator Olympia Snowe, who will continue to flourish in her quest of support for all women. I would like to present to you a brief biography of Senator Snowe and share with you a synopsis of our nomination. Senator Snowe was elected to the United States Senate on November 8, 1994, representing the state of Maine. She is the first Greek-American woman elected to the U.S. Senate. Senator Snowe is known nationally for her work on budget deficit reduction, fiscal issues, student financial aid, health care, women's issues, education technology, and foreign affairs. She has won more federal elections in Maine than any candidate since World War II. Senator Snowe has represented Maine's 2nd Congressional District for 8 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives and has earned respect for her leadership as co-chair of the Congressional Caucus for Women's Issues. In addition, she was a member of the House Budget Committee, House Foreign Affairs Committee, and was a leading member of the former House Select Committee on Aging. Senator Snowe exemplifies the objectives of the Business and Professional Women's National Federation by elevating the standards for women in business and profession, promoting the spirit of cooperation among business women, and she continually works towards opportunities for women through promoting education along the lines of industrial, scientific, and vocational activities. She is a leader and a friend to all women. Her contributions have enabled women to move forward in personal achievement, advancement, and prestige. Senator Snowe's influential impact has had an effect on women's achievements throughout the state of Maine and our nation. Maine women look to Senator Snowe as a conquering role model. She was orphaned at 9 and widowed at 26, yet she chose to become an eminent leader. She was elected to the Maine House of Representatives in 1973 when the seat was vacated by the death of her first husband and was reelected for a full 2-year term. She was elected to the Maine State Senate where she chaired the Joint Standing Committee on Health and Institutional Services, where she gained particular recognition for her work on health care issues and for sponsorship of legislation in the health field. She worked diligently with the Reagan administration to agree to support the economic discrimination against women. Her introduction to legislation to create a commission on the advancement of women and minorities in science, engineering, and technology development will ensure women and minorities to have access to jobs in these fields. Maine women have been able to successfully educate themselves and are now working in managerial and professional jobs more than ever in the state's history. 55% of college students are women, and 52% of bachelor and master degrees are awarded to women, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. It is evident that this impact on breaking down the gender barriers is helping to maintain a level in which Maine women are significantly improving their lives. Increasing federal funding for research on osteoporosis in women is just another one of the many issues Senator Snowe is pursuing for the improvement of women's lives throughout our state and nation. Senator Snow's crusade for breast cancer awareness is on the increase. The U.S. Postal Service recently released a postage stamp which depicts a woman's form with one arm raised and the other across her waist. Where her right breast would be are the words, "Fund the fight, buy the cure." 200 million stamps were printed and sell for 40 cents each, with the additional balance going towards breast cancer research. The U.S. Postal Service hopes to raise $16 million for breast cancer research. As a co-sponsor of the legislation that created the stamp, Senator Snowe is fighting to eradicate breast cancer, the killer that took her mother's life. She was pleased to be able to force the reversal of the National Cancer Institute's dictum that women under 55 need not have annual mammograms. Her response to someone's remark, "You can't legislate science," was, "You can legislate common sense." Senator Snow's voice of action presents her as a dynamic advocate for women's health issues and stands as an enduring value for all women. Senator Olympia Snowe continues to fight for women's equal rights concerning education, economic development, and health issues. She hears her constituents and works to ensure that each woman in Maine has the opportunity to make a difference in their own lives, their family, and in society. At this time, Jerry Martin and Janet Roan will continue to enhance Senator Snow's achievements in the next segment of our presentation.
Good evening. In 1978, Olympia Snowe made history when she became the youngest Republican woman ever elected to the House of Representatives. As she does to this day, she always placed a high priority on being responsive to phone calls and letters she received and returned home almost every weekend in order to travel the state to meet with people. Throughout her career in the House, Olympia Snowe worked with and for the people of Maine on a wide variety of issues of importance to them as well as to the nation. Let me just discuss some of the highlights. As the ranking Republican on the former House Select Committee on Aging's Subcommittee on Human Services, Olympia Snowe worked diligently to improve the services and benefits available to the elderly. A primary example of this can be found in her work on deceptive mailings. When her constituents brought to her attention the type of mailings which appeared to be official government documents, although they asked for money for services which are actually provided free of charge by the government, she researched the issue and introduced legislation to require these groups to display a disclaimer stating they are non-governmental. Her legislation served as the model for the bill which was enacted into law. She has been a leader in Congress on efforts to improve funding, research, and services for the two victims of Alzheimer's disease, the patient and their family. She introduced legislation to establish the advisory panel on Alzheimer's disease, which was enacted into law in 1986. Legislation she introduced to double federal research funding and to provide family support services, which included a comprehensive Alzheimer's disease bill in 1990. Understanding the vital role family members play in providing care to the elderly, Representative Snowe introduced and enacted legislation recognizing National Family Caregivers Week so that America would be educated as to their importance. In 1986, after hearing concerns from Mainers about denials for home health care benefits, Olympia Snowe got the Secretary of Health and Human Services to overturn the denials in Maine and introduce 5 bills to improve these services, 3 of which were included in legislation that were passed. Recognizing that one of the most difficult issues facing the elderly and their families come when they find themselves in need of long-term care, Olympia introduced legislation on spousal impoverishment in the 100th Congress to protect a couple's assets when one needs to go to a nursing home. Provisions of this bill were included to a catastrophic bill and were kept when the bill was repealed. Olympia was also a leader in the House on efforts to improve prevention and research services for women suffering from osteoporosis. And I've been practicing that all day. She got the Office of Technology Assessment to undertake a study on the issues related to the prevention and treatment of this terrible disease in the 101st Congress. And provisions of legislation, she introduced osteoporosis and related bone disorders were included in the NIH reauthorization bill adopted by the 102nd Congress. On a different front, Representative Snowe was ahead of her time in recognizing the tremendous threat our budget deficit represented to our nation and the burden it would place on our children. Indeed, Olympia has been a leader throughout her career to cut the debt and federal spending. As a member of the so-called 92 group, Olympia Snowe brought an alternate budget plan to the House floor for fiscal year 86 to 88. The budget plan reduced the deficit by $274 billion over 3 fiscal years without any major tax increases. She also introduced the first pay-as-you-go bill in 1991, requiring that any new spending initiatives be offset with cuts of an equal amount. In the 102nd Congress, Olympia was a leader in the fight to adopt a balanced federal budget, saying that balancing budgets was something state governments had to do every day. She worked with 3 other House members to bring a balanced budget bill to the floor. Since her first days in Washington, Senator Snowe has also been a longtime proponent for changing the way Congress does business, and her record reflects her commitment to making the government more responsive to those it was designed to serve. For 5 Congresses, she introduced legislation requiring the Congress to take a separate recorded vote on any bill which changed congressional pay. Her bill also made any pay raise prospective in nature. Language similar to her bill was finally included in the Government Ethics Act of 1990. Further, she consistently supported efforts on the floor to cut congressional spending, reform the use of frank, and cut committee staff. And she introduced legislation to the House under the same laws it passed for everyone else. Olympia Snowe has been a strong supporter of campaign finance reform. While a member of the House of Representatives, she introduced her own bills to cut PAC donations and provide a tax deduction for small individual donors, and she supported passage of the House Campaign Finance Reform Bill. Representative Snowe also worked with the House Republican Policy Committee on a 25-point comprehensive campaign finance reform package. Olympia Snowe has always understood that health care and quality of life are inseparable, and she has fought to ensure the rural states like Maine aren't left behind. In 1987, she became an original member of the House Rural Health Care Coalition and held a field hearing in Maine. In 1992, Olympia presented the Coalition Rural Health Care Bill of Rights, a policy paper she co-wrote outlining the health care needs to rural America and presenting recommendations to deal with the lack of medical professionals and transportation, the need to provide and expand healthcare facilities in rural areas, and the need for an increased emphasis in our healthcare system on education and prevention. Snowe has also been a friend to veterans over the years in ensuring that Maine veterans obtain the quality health care they always have been a priority for her. Back in the early 1980s, Olympia worked with her colleagues in a congressional delegation to get a PTSD inpatient unit established in Togus. She also worked with the delegation to get an outpatient clinic for Aroostook County veterans at Cary Medical Center. She fought to get veterans' travel benefits restored in 1986 and was an original co-sponsor of legislation which was later folded into a larger bill to restore these benefits. Throughout it all, Olympia Snowe never forgot where she came from. She knew issues like agriculture, fishing, defense, and the environment were vital to Maine's interest and worked on those fronts to make our state an even better place to live, work, and raise a family. For instance, in the House, she worked with Maine farmers to obtain research funding for crop use and worked with Maine potato industry to obtain federal funds to help improve the crops. She partnered with Maine citizens to prevent a nuclear waste storage site from being located in Maine. And she also, with members of the delegation, pressed for changes in bluefin tuna quotas so that Maine's long tradition of fishing would not be endangered. Finally, Congresswoman Snowe established herself as a strong and respected voice for women in the House of Representatives. From her leadership position as co-chair of the Congressional Caucus for Women's Issues, she introduced an Economic Equity Act, which include various provisions to assist women in the workplace, displaced homemakers, retirees, and women in need of child care. Over the years, various pieces of this omnibus bill have been included in other bills and signed into law. Olympia Snowe was also the prime Republican co-sponsor of the Act for Better Child Care, which served at the beginning of the debate in the House on child care. The Women's Health Equity Act is another major piece of legislation the caucus introduced. Olympia has been a leader in the effort to ensure that women's health care needs are given the same consideration in research field that men's needs are. She was instrumental in the establishment of an Office of Women's Health at NIH. In the 100th Congress, Representative Snowe played a vital role in developing a compromise which allowed Congress to consider the Family Medical Leave Act, which she strongly supported. She has also been active in the pro-choice arena and was the original co-sponsor of the Freedom of Choice Act. In addition to her pro-choice activities, she proposed efforts to improve contraceptive research and adoption programs in order to help cut down on the number of abortions. In conclusion, Olympia Snowe spent her 16-year House career listening to Mainers, learning from their experiences, and learning the efforts to improve their quality of life. She has continued that commitment to service in the United States Senate.
Good evening.
In 1994, Senator Snowe became the first Greek American woman ever elected to the United States Senate. She immediately established herself as a leader on a balanced federal budget, women's issues, education, and matters affecting Maine's fishermen. Today, as Maine's senior senator, she is a member of the Senate Committee on Armed Forces, where she chairs a powerful subcommittee on sea power and the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, where she chairs a subcommittee on oceans and fisheries, so important to Maine. Senator Snowe also serves on the Senate Budget Committee and the Senate Committee on Small Business. Recognizing that education is, as she has said, the great equalizer in our society and the key to our nation's economic future and survival in the 21st century, Senator Snowe continually fought to make education a priority during the balanced budget debate. Specifically, she worked hard to preserve funding for the student loan program, because in a world of increasing global competition, she knows now is not the time to be reducing federal commitment to higher education. Efforts she undertook, including sponsoring the successful amendment that restored $10 billion in student loan funding in 1996, have resulted in increased support for maintaining a strong and vibrant loan program. She also co-authored a law with Senator Jay Rockefeller that will ensure that today's students, who are tomorrow's workers, have equal access to the remarkable power and resources of the technological revolution that is sweeping the globe. The Snowe-Rockefeller provision, now known as the E-rate, means that classrooms across America can now be wired to the internet, not just those in urban areas or wealthy communities, an achievement hailed by some as the most important federal initiative to advance education into the information age of the 21st century. On the economic front, Senator Snowe has been active in ensuring the continued viability of Maine's economy, co-sponsoring legislation that reauthorized funding for the Economic Development Administration for the first time in 16 years. The EDA has brought more than $6.6 million into the state annually for the past 30 years. And with the help of her efforts, the EDA should continue to serve to further advance economic development and opportunity within the state. As she did in the House, Olympia has continued her commitment to reforming our campaign finance system. She authored an amendment to the McCain Feingold Campaign Refinance Reform Bill last year, which not only passed, but helped garner majority support for the bill for the first time. The amendment addresses a burgeoning segment of engineering ads which are making a mockery of our campaign finance system, and is now incorporated into the McCain Feingold bill as reintroduced this year. Senator Snowe has also kept her commitment to veterans, believing that the men and women who have served our nation as part of the military deserve quality health care. She has worked with members of the delegation to demand that rumors of massive funding and service cut at the Togus Veterans Hospital be dispelled once and for all. And she has received assurances that none of the vital inpatient services provided at Togus will be eliminated. As a senator, Olympia has continued to be a friend to Maine's fishermen as chair of the Senate's Ocean and Fisheries Subcommittee, fighting a proposal by the National Marine Fisheries Service that could have cost each of Maine's lobstermen thousands of dollars, but that was a questionable environmental impact. She brought the Oceans and Fisheries Subcommittee to Maine, so these fishermen could be heard firsthand, and eventually the proposal was revised to provide a scientific and credible balance that protects marine life while allowing fishermen to continue to make a living. And carrying through on the commitments she made from her very first day in Congress, Senator Snowe has also been very active in issues of particular importance to women. For instance, believing that our nation's troops should fight the way they train and train the way they fight. From her post on the Armed Services Committee last year, she won a majority victory with the passage of an amendment she authored to retain existing gender-integrated training policies until a study could be completed by a congressionally mandated commission looking into the issue. A recent report of the commission supports continuation of existing policies. Snowe has lent her support to the Women's Progress Commemoration Act, which would establish a commission to identify sites that have been instrumental in the women's movement and to help ensure their historic preservation. She's continued to advocate for increased funding for research into the cause and treatment of osteoporosis, which she calls a silent killer, affecting 28 million Americans each year. And she authored the Medicare Bone Mass Measurement Coverage Standardization Act, which allows all Medicare beneficiaries at risk of osteoporosis to have their diagnostic tests covered under the program. Snowe, along with Senator Harry Reid, also introduced a bill which would have prohibited health insurance plans that cover prescription drugs from excluding or restricting benefits for prescription contraceptive drugs or devices, saying that there is a bias in the way that many insurers treat men and women, and that bias is spotlighted by insurers' approach to the coverage of Viagra. She fought to end this disparity in coverage. While the Snowe-Reid bill, called the EPICC bill for short, was not passed last year, another measure based on it did. That measure, included as an amendment to the Treasury Postal Appropriations Bill, requires that federal employees with plans covering prescription drugs would also have to be covered for prescription contraceptives. Senator Snowe plans to continue the fight to expand this provision for all American women. She's also been a leader in the battle to end so-called drive-through mastectomies, which happen when doctors are pressured by health plans to release mastectomy patients before it is medically appropriate. Snowe has also worked on a provision based on Maine law to require insurers to cover breast reconstruction following cancer surgery. On a related health front, Snowe has worked within the Patient's Bill of Rights to ban genetic discrimination by health insurers, citing the example of one Maine woman who wrote that she wanted to have the genetic test for breast cancer done, but didn't dare for fear that insurance coverage for her and her daughters could be dropped if she tested positive. Senator Snowe also reacted quickly when in 1997 the National Cancer Society decided not to recommend routine mammograms for women in their 40s. Sharing the views of the American Cancer Society that early detection is the best hope for surviving breast cancer, Snowe offered a resolution on the Senate floor urging the Institute to revisit their decision. The resolution passed, and the Institute reversed their position. As Olympia said at the time, critics said we shouldn't legislate science, but we already had science on our side. It was common sense that we were forced to legislate. Snowe has also been involved in successful effort to allow women, and not their health insurers, to determine how long they and their newborn children should remain in the hospital after birth. She also authored a package of legislation that would require the National Institute of Health to include breast cancer advocates in breast cancer research, decision-making, require the establishing of a database containing information on all public and private clinical trials so that patients can make fully informed decisions, and call for a clearinghouse for information on women's health, among other provisions. As a leader for 2 decades on child issues, Senator Snowe has also recognized the importance of safe, affordable child care for all Americans. Joining with other concerned lawmakers, Snowe has once again introduced the Caring for Children Act, which strengthens federal child care programs and for the first time addresses the needs of parents who stay at home with their children. By expanding the dependent care tax credit, the bill makes it more affordable for working parents to choose quality care, but also leaves the door open for a parent to stay at home with their child. As Senator Snowe has said, the bill provides what parents need most: choices. Looking toward the future, Senator Snowe plans to work on an agenda that will ensure a more secure America in the 21st century. The agenda includes working to protect the federal surplus so that Social Security can be protected and strengthened. It includes providing prescription drug coverage for Medicare recipients. It also includes bolstering family security through flexible work hours, the elimination of the marriage penalty once Social Security has been strengthened, affordable child care, and improved access to affordable health care. Further, Senator Snowe will be looking to reaffirm the principles of individual opportunity and job security by providing job retraining vouchers, by strengthening our federal commitment to small business, and by ensuring that individuals are well educated and have access to the best educational institutions in the world. Finally, as a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee and chair of the Sea Power Subcommittee, Snow's agenda includes working to ensure that America's national defense remains strong in the 21st century. Thank you.
Senator Snowe, we are ever so pleased to be with you here today. You are an inspiration to all women, young and old. Your work effort is being applied toward an end in helping to ensure that women's needs are met. We sincerely treasure all that you do, not just for women, but for our state and our nation, so we may all lead happy and productive lives. It is with gratitude that we present you with a small token of appreciation from our club. The special gift is just merely to say thank you for your genuine concern and the investment of your time, your energy, and all that you do to ensure that we have a stronger life here in Maine.
Janet for their very thoughtful and generous remarks here this evening. I would say that I was speechless, but I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. Truly, I want to thank you for a most memorable evening. I also want to thank Dr. Abbott with the University of Maine here in Augusta in partnership the Maine Women's Hall of Fame. I want to thank the Caribou BPW who are so ably represented here this evening for nominating me to the Maine Women's Hall of Fame. I am eternally grateful for the tremendous honor that you have bestowed on me here this evening. I want to thank Nancy Davis, who's the president of Maine BPW, and Jeannie Hammond, who's the president of Futurama Foundation of BPW, with whom I've worked as well over the years. I want to thank you not only for tonight, but I want to thank you for what you do each and every day on behalf of women here in Maine and across the country. I'm also very, very pleased to be with Libby Mitchell, my fellow inductee. Libby and I sort of go way back. I won't say how far back. At least they didn't mention my age. Isn't that amazing? Well, you know, Libby and I go way back. I had the pleasure of serving with Libby in the Maine House of Representatives back in the 1970s. And I can tell you that Libby worked very tirelessly on behalf of her constituency and, of course, on behalf of the people of Maine. And as a public servant and as the first woman to be elected to the Speaker of the Maine House of Representatives, she indeed has served as an excellent, exceptional, extraordinary example to young women who aspire to public service. I also want to recognize some other people in the audience who have been an influence on my life. My roommate. Actually, I believe that we've already celebrated our 10th anniversary. next 10 years, and that's not just because he's my roommate, and he's my ride home. But Jock, I have to say, has always been a great supporter, you know, and when he was in the legislature, actually when he was in Congress, and when he was governor, you never had to coach him or coach him on the issues that were so important to women. He was on the forefront of so many of those issues. My cousin Georgia Thomas is here this evening. I want to thank her for all of the support that she's given me over the years in working all of those campaigns. We don't care to mention how many. Amazing. And my Aunt Mary, who has been an extraordinary influence on my life. My aunt raised me, along with her 5 children, after my parents died. And I can say that she's one of the reasons why I am here this evening. So I'm so happy to see her. She's 85 and going strong. Well, you know, I have a confession to make. I know that sounds pretty frightening coming from a politician these days. But actually, you know, being inducted into the Maine Hall of Fame is truly an event of a lifetime. But it comes at certainly a good time for me because I also just happened to celebrate a birthday. I won't say which one, except on the Celsius scale, I think it translates into about 11. But you know, my staff gave me a gift, and probably I'm making too much of this age thing, but they gave me this gift, and I was excited, and I opened it up, and it was this wrapped, framed, antique map of another location that I really didn't readily recognize. So I said, well, what is this a map of? And they said, well, it's a map of ancient Olympia. So I said, I hope you're referring to the one in Greece and not to the one in the United States. Well, I'm also delighted to see so many here this evening who are members of the Women's Hall of Fame. From Jill Nardone, with whom I have worked, from Mabel Wadsworth, who is an exceptional lady, to Eloise Vitelli and Billy Gammon, all who are outstanding. And those who aren't here, when you mentioned Brownie Schrump. You know, I told Jock the other day, I said, Brownie Schrump, I mean, no less a culinary genius. And I was telling Jock that Brownie was also a member of the Women's Hall of Fame. He said, good thing for you, Olympia, they were looking for other qualifications. Well, in any event, these women certainly have contributed so much to the advancement of women here in this state, as well as across the country. And they are remarkable for the path that they have charted for women. And that's what the Maine Women's Hall of Fame has done. As somebody once said, you know, for every generation you have to build the shoulders for direction and support for the next generation to come. And the Maine Women's Hall of Fame has been important in that regard because it has charted a course for girls and women. It's charted a course for them, for their course for greatness. It can show that their path can be as big or as wide as they so choose. The Maine Women's Hall of Fame has also, I think, underscored another recurring theme, certainly one that I have had to pursue in my own lifetime, as have so many other women. One that has been a recurring theme in women who have struggled for equality and opportunity, and that is the issue of lessons of determination. Margaret Chase Smith, who is also a fellow member of the Women's Hall of Fame, said that her entire history of public service was her determination to show that women could do what men could do without apologizing. Margaret Chase Smith was a woman of many firsts, as we all well know. She blazed trails and she raised aspirations for young girls and women of my generation and those to come. And we have to set an example for those who will come after us. The poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning once said, like tomorrow with today. And that's sort of what our battle has been all about, is to build a nation that shows our greatness, our uniqueness, that lies in the recognition that the value of our nation is only as great as the sum of its parts. that its parts are rooted in opportunities and possibilities, not just for some of our citizens, but for all of our citizens. And you know, it hasn't been easy. Ginger Rogers once observed about her dance routines with Fred Astaire. She said, you know, I had to do everything Fred Astaire did, but backwards and with high heels. Lady Astor, who was the first woman to ever serve in the British House of Parliament, on the first day she entered that august body, another member of the Parliament turned to her with a grin of sarcasm and said, Lady Astor, welcome to the most exclusive men's club in all of Europe. To which she replied with an even wider grin, well, it won't be exclusive for long, because when I came in, I left the door wide open. Well, that has been what has happened with each and every woman in America, building on one succession of progress over the other. They have been building blocks for the future. And ultimately, yes, we've left the door wide open, we've pried it open, kicked it open if necessary. But the truth is that for part of our history, that women were the great silent majority. You know, we were the majority of voters, but the call to action on the issues that were singularly important to women were met with silence. And that's why our agenda was not addressed, because there were too few women in the political process to recognize how significant these issues were. And that's why it took women getting elected to the state legislatures and to Congress that gave voice to these issues. And so when I was elected back in 1978 to the House of Representatives, and I came to the Congress, there were only 16 women in that chamber out of 435. I realized that my mission was to go to bat for women, that I had indeed had an obligation and responsibility to do what I could, because I figured if we didn't, who would? And that our successes, as well as our failures, were one that we would have to shoulder. There were too few women and too many issues that have been left unaddressed. So we couldn't even afford to be partisan. We spoke as women, not as Democrats and not as Republicans, and came to the issues that mattered to women and their families. And that's why I became co-chair of the Congresswomen's Caucus for more than 10 years with Pat Schroeder. Our adherence to bipartisanship, our ideal of principle over politics became our foundation. It did then as it does now in the United States Senate. And it worked. It made a difference. Because there was a time in America, and it wasn't just that long ago, just less than 10 years ago, when women were systematically excluded from clinical study trials that were supported by the federal government, by a premier research facility in the country, if not the world, and the National Institutes of Health. We were a medical afterthought. In fact, one famous breast cancer study was conducted, and you guessed it, men. But that was the sad reality. And we changed all of that. There was a time in America that women's health needs were woefully underfunded. Again, we were the missing page in America's medical textbooks. Whether it was ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, or osteoporosis, or breast cancer, which now has realized more than a six-fold increase over the last 10 years, from $80 million to $460 million. There was a time in America when family and medical leave was sort of taboo, that a woman had to pay the price for a newborn child or a sick member of her family. But after a lot of persistence and perseverance, I don't know how many times Pat Schroeder and I used to say, you know, they put that at the end of the session's agenda so that it wouldn't get considered. But we persevered year in and year out, and it became the law of the land. There was a time in America when child support enforcement was a woman's problem. It wasn't society, it wasn't the federal government who was paying the bills. for the failure of parents to meet their financial obligations. But we sent a message to deadbeat parents that their days of financial irresponsibility were over. There were days in America, not so long ago, when widows who were coping with the emotional hardship also discovered they had a financial hardship because their husbands would cancel their pensions without notifying them or without their consent. There's a time now in America that we're still facing a barrage, a constant barrage of attacks on the freedom of choice. Since the Roe v. Wade decision, we've had more than 300 votes. But we have fended off the attack time and time again. And there was a time in America when economic equality only pertained to men and not to women, because the laws had not changed to reflect the changing role that women were playing in our society, the dual role of work and home. We changed all that. We changed the view because we knew that women were not the June Cleavers and the Leave It to Beaver anymore. And we devised a package that would allow the advancement of women and their economic opportunities. So those were many of the changes because we were willing to work together across party lines devoted to that agenda. And yes, it wasn't easy, and the fight will continue. But what these actions say is that what is good for women is good for America. And that's why I will continue to prevail on the issues that I think matter to women, to working families, and to America. I have introduced legislation, for example, on the coverage of contraceptives. Again, it's a bias against women because they now have to pay more in out-of-pocket health care costs. And yes, we've seen the onset of Viagra, and insurance companies have hastened to cover that pill, but that has not been true of contraceptives. And I am determined to correct that imbalance. I have also introduced a bill to ban genetic testing discrimination. Again, a woman should be allowed to go to her doctor and get a genetic test to determine whether or not she has a breast cancer gene. It's not to ask that she should be able to keep her health insurance. The other day, some colleagues and I introduced legislation on child care. Because again, as much as we have done, we have to do more. And we have to allow parents to make choices in what's in the best interest for their children, whether it's to work or to stay at home. And yes, for drive-through mastectomies, again, it should be a doctor determining the length of stay for a woman in a hospital and not the bureaucrat. And so on it goes. Those are the fights that I will continue and I will wage because I think they're that important for women in America. Let me conclude by saying that I think the odyssey of women throughout the history of America is encapsulated in the story about the odyssey of a statue that was carved more than 75 years ago in honor of the women's suffrage movement. And it was a statue of Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony and Lucretia Mott, all great fighters for women's rights and for the women's right to vote. And so we had this statue languishing down in the basement of the crypt area of the Capitol. I used to like to refer to it as the Tales from the Crypt. But that statue languished down there for more than 75 years and 14 presidents. And so in 1995, some of us decided to ask if we could relocate this statue into its originally intended spot of honor in the rotunda. Well, we didn't think it was too much to ask. We couldn't imagine that a request would be so problematic as it was so straightforward. But the responses were amazing. They said, well, no, it wasn't very attractive. It used to be referred to as the ladies in the bathtub. And then they said, well, no, you really should get private funding for this statue instead of, we can't use public funding So it begs the question of how all the men's statues got into the rotunda. Then they said it weighed too much. And I thought, well, this debate shouldn't be about the weight of the statue, but rather the weight of the argument, the worthiness of a just cause. Well, it took us 2 years, plus the 75, I might add, to get the statue in its honored location in the rotunda. And I was privileged to be part of that magnificent ceremony. And I said at the time, why does it matter to have this statue in the rotunda? It's the same reason why it matters that all those other statues are in the rotunda. If we are going to celebrate what women have accomplished, then we have to celebrate those women who gave life to our dreams. If we are to appreciate where we are today and the opportunities that we have to appreciate those who fought to give us those opportunities. And if we are to exercise our rights with strength and wisdom and courage, then we must understand that these rights came to us, not by entitlement, but by struggle. I want that statue to reverberate in the rotunda. I never again want women's accomplishments to sort of languish, to be relegated into the basement of the annals of history. I want that statue where it is today, in the rotunda, in the grandest of buildings, so that every day, every young girl, every woman, every person who walks through that rotunda will hear those voices, will be forever inspired by that struggle in pursuit of justice. I want everybody around the globe to know the importance of women's participation in the greatest democracy that the world has ever known. Thank you.
The Maine Federation of Business and Professional Women's Club and the University of Maine at Augusta presented the 10th annual Maine Women's Hall of Fame Award to Olympia Snowe, United States Senator, nominated by the Caribou Business and Professional Women, signed by Nancy Davis, BPW Maine Federation President, Jean L. Hammond, BPW Maine Futurama Foundation President, and Dr. Thomas Abbott, University of Maine at Augusta, presented the 20th of March 1999 at the University of Maine, Augusta.
Thank you very much.
Do you see why this is my favorite BPW event? I just think it's just grand that we have such marvelous women. There are a lot of unsung heroes, too, sitting out here and all over the state of Maine. The presenters for Libby Mitchell will be Audrey Daigle, Barbara Alexander, Christine Burke, and Representative Steve Rowe. Frank O'Hara is sorry that he couldn't be with us. It was a death in the family. And if they would come out.
Congratulations to two special people in my life, and welcome to all the other honorees and family members in Olympia's Aunt Mary. It's great to see you again.
I saw you in Washington, D.C. when you received an award by the Old Women's League a few years ago, and to all of you for coming tonight. In 1974, a wonderful thing happened for the state of Maine, and in particular for Maine women and their families. A new legislative district that included Vassalboro was established. To quote the Portland Telegram, because of the new district, it was possible for a South Carolina native who had been in Maine only 3 years to run for the Maine legislature and win. Her third child, by the way, was born a week after that election. That South Carolinian is our own Elizabeth H. Mitchell, affectionately known to all of us as Libby. Libby is wife, mother, grandmother, educator, public servant, mentor, friend, advocate, trendsetter, and a leader. Maine Centers for Women Work and Community, and WELAC, the Women's Legislative Advocacy Coalition, are proud to have nominated Libby Mitchell for the 1999 Maine Women's Hall of Fame. And I especially want to thank Libby for having had breakfast at the White House this morning and being here this evening with us. Libby's married to Jim Mitchell. They are parents of 4 children and have 3 grandchildren. Their daughter, J. Elizabeth Mitchell, served in the Maine legislature as a representative from Portland, while their son Charles was elected in 1998 to represent Vassalboro and Augusta and in the House of Representatives. And they both, unfortunately, are in England today. Libby's a graduate of Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina, and received her master's degree in education from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Libby's accomplishments are far too numerous for me to stand here and list and do justice to this evening, but I do want to mention just a couple of them. Her appointments and awards as a lifelong champion of education, the newly established Elizabeth H. Mitchell Scholarships at both the University of Maine system and the Maine Technical College system. The University of Maine system scholarship will be offered annually to a woman who is majoring in government, and the Maine Technical College System Scholarship will benefit a woman majoring in a non-traditional career. The National Awards for Excellence under her leadership at the Maine State Housing Authority from 1986 to 1990, chairing the National Task Force on the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, Executive Committee member of the National Council of State Housing Finance Agencies, a director of the Maine Homeless Coalition, Oak Grove Coburn School and the Vassalboro Community School Parent-Teacher Organization, chairman of the Board of Directors of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston, and she recently was approved by President Clinton for a second 4-year term, chair of the Council of Federal Home Banks, and all that she has accomplished within the Maine State Legislature. Libby held the office of State Representative from 1974 through 1984, and again from 1990 through 1998. Elizabeth H. Mitchell launched a new political era in 1996 when she was elected the first female House Speaker in the state's 176-year history. She is the highest-ranking Maine woman ever to serve in state office. Earlier in her career, she was also the first female to become the House Majority Leader. Libby's achievements have had a strong impact and significantly improved the quality of the lives of women and girls in the state of Maine. She believes that education is the road to economic development and that the surest way to improve income is to expand educational opportunity. She focused on the 20,000 Maine children going hungry every day. She focused on the big picture without neglecting the small steps it takes to get there. Libby's first experience with the Maine legislature was when she was lobbying for the Equal Rights Amendment with the League of Women Voters. Libby said, "I was so frightened of them. I saw them as extremely important and felt they wouldn't talk to anyone like me." Evidently, she never forgot that experience, because this is the part of Libby that I have grown to love and respect. My first close encounter with Libby was in 1981, when we participated on a 6-woman panel at a Superwoman conference here at UMA. In fact, right on the stage. Like Libby, I was frightened, and my goal was to live through the experience. I think I did that. After about the 4th speaker who was talking, Libby gave me a pat and said, "You'll do just fine." How did she know I was so nervous? In the halls of the State House, Libby went out of her way to speak with me, learned what issues brought me there, and thanked me for taking the time to be there. I wasn't the only one that she did that with. Libby was this way with all Maine women and girls inside the State House and out. When traveling around to speak with groups, she encourages women and girls of all ages to believe in themselves, find their voice, and become involved. Libby, you have shown Maine women by your example that the speaker can wear a skirt, that you can have a standard of excellence, and you have set a standard of excellence for speakers to follow, female or male. Governor King described Libby Mitchell as a model legislator. She keeps her word, she's smart, she's focused on what she wants, and she's public-spirited. To that, Libby, we add that you are a kind, gentle, energetic role model who just happens to be wife, mother, grandmother, educator, public servant, mentor, friend, advocate, trendsetter, and leader. We thank you, and we love you.
Good evening. My name is Steve Rowe, and I'm pleased to be here tonight to honor Libby and also to honor all of the women who have been selected as inductees in the Maine Women's Hall of Fame, and especially those of you who are here tonight. It's especially an honor to be here today as Senator Snowe and Speaker Mitchell are inducted into the Hall. As you know, they have both served in the institution that I'm so fond of, the Maine House of Representatives, so it's a great honor to be here. I may be substituting for Frank O'Hara. I know Frank couldn't be here tonight, but I'll tell you, I'm very happy to be here, and it's really an honor. I'd like to congratulate Senator Snowe and thank her for her many years of committed service, both to our state and to our nation. And I know that Senator Snowe views public service as a high calling. I have heard her speak of the fundamental themes of public service as identifying the public good and then using the qualities of leadership to solve problems and to attain the public good. And I know that she has worked toward that effort for us, both at the state level in Washington. So again, congratulations to you, Senator Snowe. And now about Libby Mitchell. I agree with everything Audrey said. I mean, Libby is great, and everybody that knows her knows how great she is. I've had the pleasure of knowing Libby for the past at least 7 or 8 years on a pretty close basis, working with her. I certainly knew her before then, and I don't know how well she knew me, but I knew her and was in awe of her. I served with Libby in the 116th, 117th, and the 118th Maine legislatures. I also had the privilege of serving with her daughter Elizabeth in the 117th and 118th, and now I have the pleasure and privilege of serving with her son in the 119th. So Libby has been prolific in many ways, for the state of Maine, and Jim as well. Libby's service, and as we talk about Libby tonight, it's not over. I was talking about the letter that hangs out on the board, and at the end I said you ought to leave some space because I know there's more to come. I agree with Audrey about all the things Libby as a wife, mother, grandmother, educator. She's also a risk taker. She's a visionary. She's a true leader, and she's proved that time and time again in whatever she's done working for the people of the state of Maine. She's a public servant in the truest sense of that term. Her career in public service is a testament to her love for Maine people and also her sense of commitment to the state of Maine. Her 18 years of service in the Maine House of Representatives are legend, and you can ask anyone who served with Libby. Over that time, she provided visionary leadership. She's known by most everyone as a true champion for education in the state of Maine. She guided landmark K-12 education reform through the legislature. She focused attention on the need to help families with the cost of higher education. And then she worked to ensure that the state provided that help. On women's issues, there are so numerous the things that Libby has done, from child care to health care policies. She's been on the forefront of almost everything. She sponsored legislation that expanded access to education and training for recipients of welfare. But her contributions were not limited just to education or women's issues. They were very broad. She worked to increase home ownership, both as a legislator and also as director of the Maine State Housing Authority. She created a district court family division. She worked to create transitional residential programs for adolescent girls at risk. So her accomplishments are numerous, and they're too numerous to mention this evening. But I think one of the most notable things that I believe Libby did was to staunchly defend the legislature as an institution. I just want to touch on that for a second. She took obvious pride in the people's branch of government, and she worked in a determined manner to maintain its independence and its prerogatives. And she did this while knowing often that the popular political wind was blowing the other way on some of these issues. So she certainly was a person of tremendous character and tremendous courage. When Libby was elected Speaker in 1996, she became the first female Speaker in our state's history. That's well documented. Her election and her term as Speaker served and continues to serve as an inspiration for girls and women throughout the state of Maine, inspiring them to believe in themselves, to get involved, to set their goals high, and to then stay the course. I know my daughter is one of those. Libby also serves as an inspiration for women and girls to value education and to view education as a lifelong learning process. I believe it was Margaret Thatcher who once said, in politics, if you want anything said, ask a man. If you want anything done, ask a woman. Well, Libby Mitchell was asked by the people of Maine to do a job, and boy, did she do a job. She did exceedingly well, and she continues to this day. Her service as Speaker was obviously unique because she was the first woman to hold that post, but I think it was also unique for another reason. I agree with Audrey. She raised the bar for the speakership. She set a standard of excellence for others to follow. She set visionary goals, and she provided strong leadership to attain those goals. And I personally learned a lot by watching and working with Libby and I'm certainly honored to follow her as Speaker of the House of Representatives. You can tell a lot about a person's character if you consider their conduct when no one is watching. I've heard that and I know it's true. Well, I just want to tell you that as we transitioned, as Libby's term was ending and mine was beginning, you could really tell a lot about Libby's character. She was so helpful and so gracious during that transition time. And without that, I would not have been able to have really gotten the start I did. Libby didn't have to do that, but she cared enough about it, the institution and the people of the state of Maine, that she was there really assisting me. And she continues to be a sounding board. So, Libby, I'm just really grateful for that. I know as Speaker, the best tribute that I can give to Libby as I work at this office is to keep the bar high, and to keep the People's House, the Maine House of Representatives, strong, independent, and vibrant. And if I do that, I know Libby will be proud of me, and I hope to do that as I continue on. As I looked at the booklet tonight, I was looking at the criteria for induction in the Maine Women's Hall of Fame, and it was about achievements that have a significant statewide impact, that significantly improve the lives of women, and have an enduring value on women. When I think about the achievements of Libby Mitchell over her public career, she obviously meets every one of those goals, many goals over, and I'm just so pleased to be a part of this. I've told Libby I do have to. I had another. My wife's mad somewhere. She's in Portland at another. I thought it started at 4:30, so I will be leaving. I hope you'll excuse me. But I just want to say that I'm so pleased to be here today. I should ask. I'm new at this. I should ask questions. Libby, you knew what was going on. No, but it's a real pleasure to be here. And I know Chris Burke has more things to tell you about Libby. But I'll tell you, I've met a lot of people in public service, and I've never met anyone like Libby Mitchell. Her level of dedication and commitment is just unparalleled. And I'll forever be grateful for all that she's done for me. And I know that she's done so much for the women and the girls of the state of Maine, and also for the men and the boys of the state of Maine. So, Libby, thank you for all you do.
Good evening. I'm Christine Burke, and I want to thank everyone for allowing me to be here this evening to honor Libby Mitchell and Senator Snowe. I was stunned when I was asked to speak on behalf of Libby. I thought to myself, who am I? I mean, I'm just a neighbor of Libby. I really don't stand out much in the crowd unless you get me talking. And as all of you well know, Libby is friend to and admired by many prestigious and accomplished people. Any one of them would have welcomed the opportunity to pay tribute to Libby here tonight. Libby is friend of CEOs of national banks, to president of large multinational corporations, to statesmen and women across this nation. Former Senator George Mitchell alone, who just this week received the Medal of Freedom, would gladly have spoken in tribute to Libby here tonight. Instead, he got me. Any of those people would have been glad to have told of all of Libby's accomplishments. Each would have cataloged all that Libby has done for the people of Maine. They could easily have spoken for hours of all the efforts that Libby has led to ensure equality in all arenas of life for all of Maine's citizens. As most of you are aware, Libby sponsored the state's Equal Rights Bill. Libby has also drawn on her background as an educator to fight for the importance of educational issues. From increasing the basic level of pay for educators, to improving the quality of the material taught, to increasing access to educational opportunities, Libby Mitchell has had a tremendous role in improving education that Maine citizens receive at all levels of the educational spectrum. Last year alone, Libby's efforts doubled the amount of state-sponsored scholarship monies, alliteration was too much for me there, available to the most needy of Maine's students. As Libby has led efforts in several other areas as well, including fighting for access to health care for uninsured and underinsured Mainers, access to quality child care, improving the Head Start programs, and several hundred other initiatives, too numerous to name here. Yet, perhaps Libby's least lauded legacy lies in the intangible. I worked that one. Lies in the intangible and immeasurable effect her career has had on ordinary women. Again, as is common knowledge, Libby is a woman of many firsts. She is the first woman to have been elected to position of the House Assistant Majority Leader after only 2 years of service in the House. She went on to be the first woman Majority Leader, the first woman to head up the Maine State Housing Authority, and most recently, the first woman to serve as the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Any one of these achievements would certainly have qualified her to be inducted into this august group. Libby achieved each of these notable goals with a quiet grace and determination that belied the significance of the achievement. She made it look easy to reach those goals, she said. She made it look as though there had been no barriers. In doing so, Libby has made all of us who follow in her footsteps understand that there really are no barriers, just challenges that lie before us. Libby would be the last to say that she has blazed a trail or broken through a barrier, or that she could be the inspiration or catalyst for any of us here tonight. Yet that is exactly who she is. She has helped each and every one of us present, and many hundreds of those of us coming behind know that all arenas are open to us. The epitome of grace and professionalism, Libby Mitchell has made each of us understand that we do not need to disavow our gender to become successful. Rather, Libby has enabled all to understand that the
female voice is both important and credible, and that its inclusion helps create a whole that is otherwise lost by a text agent. Libby blazed this trail with wit and sensitivity, with humor and intelligence, with charm and ability. Women all over Maine now know that they too can achieve similar heights. Women all over Maine know too that the first person cheering them on and encouraging them to surpass her lofty achievements would be Libby Mitchell. Through her untiring efforts, she ensured the possibility that her neighbors and the daughters of her neighbors feel that no door is closed to them. On behalf of everyone, Libby, I thank you. We are all thrilled that you are receiving this award tonight and honored to be sharing this moment with you. But then, of course, we know that Libby Mitchell will have it no other way.
It's 3 times to stand up, 1 time to sit down. That's the routine. I feel that I should leave not only the room, but the state, perhaps the planet, because how could I ever enjoy an evening like this and feel like they're talking about someone else? Don't you, Olympia? Who is this person? I'd really like to get to know them. It is extraordinarily humbling and such a great honor. And I want to thank the women of the Business Professional Women's Association for creating a Women's Hall of Fame. Think about that. For 10 years, I remember as I came in tonight going over and reading it, and I was so moved by all the stories of the women up there. And isn't that what it's all about? Maine, its sense of community, and each one reaching out and thinking the other. And just when we think it's easy and we take all this for granted, and we sometimes sit back thinking that women have really gotten there. After all, we have one of the most powerful women in the United States Senate, and I mean that with great respect. We've had a first woman Speaker of the House. We have women in the workforce. We have women managing their own companies. We're already there, and yet I remember reading and being struck with the statement. The Renaissance woman up there on the board was Laughlin from Holton. Is that where she was from? But at any rate, as I read about her as the first woman lawyer in the state legislature, I had just read an article written by my husband's wonderful sister, who writes about women's history in Arkansas. And she was talking about how difficult it was, frankly, to even practice law in those days. You might have gotten the title of lawyer, but you couldn't even go into the courts. It was just not the same. But I read about one of the, and she had many, many achievements, but one of them, think about this, and it just was not that long ago, one of the pieces of legislation was an act to prohibit men from involuntarily committing their spouses to a mental institution. And it's almost funny, but it's not. That wasn't that very long ago. And that young women had to be older than 13 to get married. She raised the bar, for boys too, to 18. And you think about that, and you marvel at how far we've come and how far we have to go. And I also leaned over and asked my wonderful colleague here, I couldn't quite remember the name of this person, but I keep thinking how small the things that we do as everyday women and men in our lives, and wonder if they have an impact. Because that really is what all this is. It's all of us working together, doing what we do every day. And I've learned that more, I think, since I left public office, as I reflect on how you can make a difference without having an elected position. And it was that right to vote that was so hard to come by. And I wish I could remember his name. I apologize, I cannot. That's a young man from Tennessee who was wavering on that one vote that was going to make the difference. Now, it was a man, a young man, of course, because the women couldn't vote about whether they could get it. And he got a letter from not someone extraordinarily important, not from an elected official, but from Mom. Mom
said, I think it's Henry, do the right thing. And he did. But it always has stood out to me as an example of how you have an influence and how it ripples out forevermore. I'd also like to thank my long-suffering husband, Jim. I know that even though Governor McCurtain has learned to live with the wife in the spotlight, it sometimes gets very tiring. You're both very experienced at this, but how important it is. It is so very, very important to come home and to be able to talk with someone who will listen to your stories that don't make that much difference to anybody else, but are the most important thing in the world to you that day, and help you get through the next day and to fight the next battle. And what you may not know about my husband, because he is very humble, is that he's the Kennebec County Judge of Probate. And he spends many, many days, and he spent many, many months, and one of the happiest moments when he presides over adoptions. And he does so much for families as he takes them through a very important process in their lives and sets the standards for them to go forward. And I want to say something else about this wonderful lady. And I know she was blanching when you said she'd served in elective office more than anybody else. Well, I want you to know that we do go way back. And I will not begin. I couldn't possibly. I mean, there was a Gone with the Wind saga up here, book length of all the accomplishments of Olympia Snowe. But she also has the personal touch, the little things that don't make it to a printed biography that won't be on this Hall of Fame wall. I remember in 1984, this wonderful woman was walking in the Blueberry Festival parade. My sister was up working with me on a campaign that I was involved in, and she was so impressed with her. She took time to speak to her, another woman from South Carolina, and she was speaking to all the children with their colorful crepe paper tricycles, and all the men and women who line the side of the road, believing so strongly in the future of Machias and Washington County. And even though she was a very important person at the time also, she walked with her sneakers right down the road with everybody else. And I want to also say something about her husband.
I'm guilty, don't
I'm going to tell you something about her husband. I have to tell this story first. It was said that, and it's true, when I was asked to go and lobby for the Equal Rights Amendment, I was absolutely terrified to talk to a legislator. And that's the famous story we all pass around. When you first become a legislator, you're just in awe and you wonder how they all got there. And 2 days later, how you got there. And 2 days later, after you've known them, you wonder how they got there. But that didn't happen to me with I knew Jock McCurtain before he was a governor. And I guess it's okay to call you Jock. I noticed Olympia did, so I followed you. I didn't know if you were John. But at any rate, and this was one of the most exciting things in the world, he was the floor leader of the Republican Party. I was a freshman, upstart Democrat who really didn't know where anything was, and he gave me the privilege, and I do mean that, and I have remembered it and have been grateful for it to this day, of co-sponsoring with him Maine's returnable bottle bill. And not a women's issue, but I think it was. And I'm not closing my circle about these two fabulous people. I want to say something very important about Augusta and Gilda and the whole issue of I can't even pronounce their new name, women, work, and community. And it goes to what Senator Snowe was saying about women being in the Congress and how important it is for women to have a place at the table. And I think about the creation when they were fighting so hard for a program called Displaced Homemakers. Doesn't that sound archaic? Well, I never did know what a displaced homemaker was. Was she lost or what? But the issue was a very serious one. Many, many women going back into the workforce without the adequate skills and training, without the benefits that they might need to survive. This little organization was fighting to be born, and it needed a small amount of funding. And the way the legislative process works in those days, and even now, you needed someone in a strong position of leadership to carry the water for an important issue. At that time, the 10 members of leadership were 9 men and me. It wasn't that they didn't like the program. There are lots of worthy programs, but it was very important to have the woman's voice at the table. And you never let me forget it. And that was very important. Though this woman is no longer in the United States Senate, but she also had a very big burden there, and I know Olympia can confirm this. When you are the first, it's a huge responsibility, and you want to make sure you do it right so that those people can follow you and that door stays open, and you want it to be a success. And it was Senator Carol Mosley brought in her comment was, it had to do with women's retirement benefits. And her comments then were, it wasn't that the men who were in Congress were trying to leave out women, but they didn't think about it. But most of the women were not in the workforce, so having that voice at the table to bring that perspective, after all, is what our democracy is all about. That we have Hispanics, that we have blacks, that we have women, that we have men, all at the table to bring those issues there. And I'm going to close by talking about this one, who is very humble and is probably one of the brightest women I have ever met, and very successful. I would not have been Speaker of the Maine House of Representatives for Chris Burke, and let me explain that to you. If Chris Burke ran and was elected to my seat, which I had gone and left, I was Director of Maine State Housing, I left the legislature, I had been out for 6 years. It never occurred to me that I would ever go back, not that I didn't enjoy it, but life moves on. Well, Chris Burke had done an outstanding job as a freshman legislator, but she got accepted to the Maine Law School. Well, that was good, but Chris Burke also had 2 young boys, and she basically called me and said, something's got to go, and I would like to keep my children. So she persuaded me, and it wasn't very easy because you're a little reluctant because you had all read Thomas Wolfe about you can't go home again, to go back to that place. But it was a wonderful decision and a wonderful opportunity. And I must admit, it was all Chris Burke's idea. Had I not had a chance to go back, I would not have had a chance to be Speaker. I want to share one very important moment of that speakership with you. And then I will close because you are the most wonderful, long-suffering people. This has to be family. When I was sworn in as Speaker, and I need to tell you this, my daughter Elizabeth was a state representative from Portland when I was in the legislature. And I've told this story to some of my women friends, but there's something absolutely extraordinary about having rebellious teenage daughters grow up and have to address you as Madam Speaker. And they can only speak when you say the chair. So this was wonderful, and it went very well. And but I wanted to say, on the day that I was sworn in, I knew with the electricity in the air, it was not about me. I really, truly understood that. It wasn't about all the stories about what does the Speaker wear, because we had no idea what a Speaker wore. It didn't matter anyway. We found a suit that looked suspiciously like an undertaker's garment to me. Trying to keep up tradition, if you will. But the halls were packed. I had invited what I thought was a small chorus from the Vassalboro Community School to sing. And they decided, I think, they wanted all the kids to come because they started breaking them down the aisle, and they kept coming, and they kept coming. I think every child in the Vassalboro Community School signed up for the chorus that day. So they were all there. But more importantly, I had words ringing in my ears like the words of Representative Ken Gagne from Waterville. He had brought his 2 young daughters. And he said, I want my daughters to be here for this occasion. And he really spoke, I think, for a lot of my male colleagues. But the one moment, and if you've ever observed the Maine legislature, and many of you have, on the side of each wall are the list of every legislator's name. And when you vote, it goes red or green. I used to wish for yellow, but there wasn't one of those. You had to vote yes or no. And while I didn't know this was going to happen, they took down Mr. Speaker and put up the sign, Madam Speaker. There was not a dry eye in the place. It was not about me, but it was about a new chance, a new breakthrough. And finally, outside the Speaker's office in Augusta, and it always bothered me my many years in the legislature, there was finally a picture of a woman. Maybe not the prettiest picture of a woman you've ever seen, but there was a woman on the wall with those 92 men who have been Speaker of the Maine House. opportunity, change. Women can do this. And that's what we try to do in every day. That's every day when you go up and you try to do something, it's in small ways, whatever you're doing, whatever your role in life, that you're making this extraordinary difference. That son that was due on election day had the good sense to be born a week later. That son is a freshman representative. Now, Jim and I are not trying to control the state of Maine. You'll be happy to know that our youngest daughter is in Mexico, and the daughter that was in the legislature is in London. And though they're not here tonight, they wrote and said that they were so proud. And I know that my daughters and my sons, equally important, my sons, understand the message that we're all giving here tonight. I can't thank you enough. I thank you for your patience, your long suffering, and I am so extraordinarily honored to be on the platform with Olympia Snowe. This is just a very, very important moment for the Mitchell family. Thank you very much.
You can tell we have co-chair. We're splitting the duties. Maine Federation of Professional Women's Club and the University of Maine and Augusta present this 10th annual Maine Women's Hall of Fame Award to Elizabeth Mitchell. Former Speaker, the Maine House of Representatives, nominated by the Maine Centers for Women Work and Community and the Women's Legislative Agenda Coalition, signed by Nancy Davis, the President of the BPW Maine Federation, Jean L. Hammond, the President of the BPW Future Effort Foundation, and by Dr. Thomas Abbott of the University of Maine.
This, as many of you know, is Women's History Month, and we decided to do the Maine Women's Hall of Fame as part of Women's History Month. And we were approached by the U.S. Postal Service, and they would like to do more emphasis on Women's History Month, and they are here to give us a short presentation on that. At this time, I would like to present from the U.S. Postal Service, the retail specialist, Alicia Gam.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alicia Dow, and I am a retail specialist for the United States Postal Service for the District of Maine. As a woman in the marketing department of a major business, I am very happy to be here at the Women's Hall of Fame induction ceremony tonight. The Postal Service has a long history of promoting women to prominent career positions at all levels. In addition to myself, the District of Maine has many women executives, including our marketing manager, Tanya Roy, and one of the highest-ranking postal executives in the state, our district manager, Barbara Patterson. Now I would like to talk to you about women in stamps, about the program we call Celebrate the Century, and about these 3 stamps in particular that are a part of the Celebrate the Century series. The United States Postal Service is not only in the mail service industry, but also in the history business. We commemorate special people, places, events, and trends with tiny pictorials that we call stamps. I spent some time looking for women represented in the Postal Service Guide to U.S. Stamps, which includes pictures and descriptions of all the stamps ever issued in the United States. Although the first postage stamp included in this book was issued in 1847, no woman appeared on the United States postage stamp until 46 years later, in January 1893. Even then, the first woman who appeared on the United States postage stamp was not an American and did not appear alone on the stamp. Isabella, Queen of Spain, appeared on several stamps in a series called the Columbian Exposition issue, which actually honored Christopher Columbus. It wasn't until 10 years later, in December 1902, that another woman was honored on a United States postage stamp. Martha Washington was the first American woman to appear alone on a postage stamp issued in this country. Martha Washington reappeared on 9 more postage stamps between 1923 and 1939. Since the late 1930s, women and women's issues have been a focus of many more stamps. This truly recognizes the American culture, which now recognizes women and their accomplishments much more than was done in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The United States Postal Service has honored women in the performing arts, including Patsy Cline, Grace Kelly, Fanny Brice, Mahalia Jackson, and Billie Holiday. We have recognized artists, including Grandma Moses and Mary Cassatt. The list of authors and poets includes Louisa May Alcott, Willa Cather, Marianne Moore, Emily Dickinson, Margaret Mitchell, and Dorothy Parker. We have honored pilots, Amelia Earhart, Blanche Stewart Scott, Harriet Quimby, Jacqueline Cochran, and Bessie Coleman, and athletes Hazel Whiteman, Helene Madison, and Babe Didrikson Zacharias. Educators, including Mary Lyon and Mary McLeod Bethune, have been featured, as well as those in the medical field, including Clara Moss, Clara Barton, and Dr. Mary Walker. Women's issues have also taken their place on stamps. The Breast Cancer Awareness and the Breast Cancer Research Semi-Postal Stamp are prime examples, and the Breast Cancer Research Semi-Postal Stamp was a result of the legislation co-sponsored by our Senator Olympia Snowe. The women's right to vote has also been a major subject for postage stamps. Susan B. Anthony appeared twice, and the women's suffrage movement, which she led, has also found its way onto 3 stamps, marking the 50th anniversary in 1970, the 75th anniversary in 1995, and as one of the most important events of the 1940s decade, which was just released last month in February, in the Celebrate the Century series. And this brings me to the Celebrate the Century program, the United States Postal Service stamp tribute to the past 100 years. The program began in February 1998 and continues into the year 2000. The program commemorates each decade with a sheet of 15 different stamps honoring the most significant people, places, events, and trends of the 20th century. When we think about the last 100 years, about the people who have made this century great, and about the important events of this century, our thoughts include women and women's issues. The public has also been given the opportunity to help choose subjects featured on the 1950s through the 1990s. We have already concluded voting on the 1950s through the 1980s, and these selections will be available later this year and early next year. As a matter of fact, 2 of the subjects already chosen honor women and women's issues. I Love Lucy, one of the most popular 1950s TV shows, featured one of America's most talented comedians, Lucille Ball. And appropriately, the women's rights movement was one of the subjects chosen for the 1970s. The ballots for the 1990s will be your last chance to pick a stamp, so look for some more women and women's issues on that. And that will be your last chance to pick the stamps you want to see printed. So watch for the ballots to come out in May of this year. They will be available at all post offices. The Postal Service has issued the stamp sheets for the first 5 decades, one each for the 1900s through the 1940s. Now I would like to discuss the 3 stamps surrounding me, and one more that has already appeared in the Celebrate the Century series. On the 1920s sheet, 2 stamps recognized women, Margaret Mead and the 19th Amendment. The backside of the stamps tell the story. Anthropologist Margaret Mead explored the effect of culture on the behavior and personalities of children and adults, as well as the differences between men and women. And the 19th Amendment says, the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified August 26, 1920. The fight for women's suffrage had been won, ending a struggle that began in the mid-19th century. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, who had already been honored on 2 United States postage stamps prior to this one, appears on the 1930 sheet. The text on the back side of this stamp, as soon as I can find it, says, Eleanor Roosevelt was an extremely vocal, active, and influential First Lady. During press conferences for women reporters and in her syndicated column, she championed the rights of women, youths, minorities, and the disadvantaged. The most recent issue, the 1940s, includes Women Support the War Effort, We Can Do It. As this text tells us, when millions of men joined the armed forces, millions of women took over factory jobs and made up more than 1/3 of the civilian workforce. Millions of women also served as volunteers. At this time, I'd like the previous inductees to the Women's Hall of Fame to step forward, and I can actually hand it to you right here. I'd like to present you a sheet of the 1920s, which has both Margaret Mead and the 19th Amendment on it, and any representatives of those who couldn't attend tonight. Now I would like Senator Snowe to join me, and I'd like to present her this enlargement of the 19th Amendment stamp. This enlargement of the 19th Amendment stamp is a tribute to her many positions and elected offices, from the Maine State House of Representatives to her current position in the United States Senate, and also in honor of your fight to get that statue in the rotunda. I'm going to walk behind you so that at the end you side of this. And I would like Libby Mitchell to rise and accept this enlargement of the Eleanor Roosevelt stamp. This enlargement of the Eleanor Roosevelt stamp is a tribute to her own work with women, children, and the disadvantaged. And finally, Jean Hammond. The Women Support the War Effort, We Can Do It stamp. I am presenting this to Jean in recognition of the Women's Hall of Fame, and as women, we can do it.
On behalf of all of us with the Women's Hall of Fame, the BPW, the Foundation, the University of Maine, Augusta, we want to thank the U.S. Postal Service for your participation here this evening. This has been new and different, and we're really very excited about it. And we also would like you to know that some of us have worked hard and we've signed petitions to have a stamp in honor of Margaret Chase Smith.
One thing I'll say about people who appear on stamps, unless it's a United States president, they have to be deceased for at least 10 years. A United States president only has to be deceased for 1 year, though. Now I'm going to turn the ceremony back to Sally Parks and Maxine Russell. Thank you.
Well, we have a few things. Speaking of husbands, Sally and I would like to thank our husbands. I leave the house, Phil says, "Don't volunteer." Anyway, so this is our 10th annual, and Sally has been the chairman of this for 8 of the 10. Right. And now that I have been part of it this year, I realize what a job it is. So I want to give her something. I do not remember telephone numbers, but I know hers by heart. I want to thank everybody for attending. I want to thank everybody that brought the corkscrews. We had all kinds of things that were important, but everybody that did anything, we really have appreciated it. All of you who were attending, the presenters, the judges, the Postal Service, our wonderful people that are our special people. There is a special appreciation to all of the donors, or as my husband says, donors, who are listed on the inside, back of the cover of the program booklet. And then there is an insert that you will find. I do want you to know that the flowers that were on each of the individual tables were given by the flower tribe in Augusta. So many of you that are living here, I'd like to have a couple of those that were on the tables that we ate at, please. We have really had a wonderful time doing this. Phil will bear with me, and there have been a few moments that haven't been that great. Thank you. I would like to have one of these for Aunt Mary. And the other one is for Mrs. Tom Abbott. I mean, Sally and I have been calling her husband at different hotels. Anyway, we've had a great time. This is the first time that we've had anything quite this large at their event. Before, it's always been held in an afternoon. And I hope you've all had a good time. And one more thing before I stop and let Sally have the last word. In the interest of saving our world, would you please leave your name badges up at the back, because we believe in recycling. And thank you again. Have a wonderful trip.